I went to the beach the other day and I was sitting on the sand and watching the waves and seeing all the kids play in the water and splash each other and run up to their parents excitedly. And I saw the big rock structures of this beautiful dark brown color in the water, and everything was serene, and I had taken an edible and it was hitting, and I was just having all these epiphanies, as you do. And I was thinking about how I need to love my body more, and I need to decolonize my mind and disattach my mind from the patriarchal concepts that have been embedded in it so firmly, so as not to let the patriarchy win and even completely take over my own private thoughts. And I was just thinking very positively, and then I got distracted, and I wanted to go back to that. I wanted to go back to the serenity and the epiphany, and I was upset that I wasn't in that state of mind any longer. It's like when you meditate and you reach like such a nice and calm and surreal and transcendent point, and when it stops, you feel some sense of discontentment. And I guess I'm grappling with the notion that doing things imperfectly is better than not doing them at all. And even the time that I was sitting on the beach after I had that transcendental mental experience, I was still sitting on a beach. And no matter how imperfectly I felt I was sitting on that beach, I was still there. And that was better than not being there, not having gone at all. And I just moved into a new dorm, and I'm only living here for 2 months. A little less than 2 months, actually. But I still had to unpack all my things. And something about that has been gnawing away at me, because it feels like, why would I make this space my own? You know, I put a lot into my spaces. I like to call my rooms my museums. Not that I've ever really had multiple rooms, just rooms plural, as in the different dorms I've lived in over the years. And there's something about having a space for a relatively short period of time that makes me not want to make it good or make it beautiful or make it my own, because I'm already stressing about packing it up. I'm already, before I even started unpacking, I started stressing about the fact that in 8 weeks I'm gonna have to pack it all back up again. And it just kind of struck me that it's a similar issue of having a thing. Like, I get to live in this beautiful dorm for 2 whole months, and instead of gripping onto a sense of gratitude for something that I would never have been able to imagine before coming to Stanford, I'm feeling like somehow the problem aspect and the stress aspect is the thing, instead of just a part of the thing that I can let wash away if I properly address my own thoughts, which is what I'm trying to do right now. And I guess being at Stanford has also presented a similar challenge in that I did not do Stanford perfectly. I'm not even sure that I did Stanford well. I was depressed for long periods of time. I had my heart broken. I had friends who I lost. And I've learned a lot, and I'm much more stable and steady now. And I'm grateful for everything that I learned. But there's just this overarching anxiety that has plagued me for so long as I've watched other people here get internships and figure out what they're doing with their careers and start making money and start creating this cushion of, safety and financial literacy that I don't feel like I have. And I just see so glaringly the ways that I've done this imperfectly. And when I try to tell myself, well, not everyone goes to Stanford, not everyone gets this, is gifted this, I feel like I am buying into this elitism and like this way of thinking that this is somehow putting me above other people, and that my being here at all is somehow more important than the lives of people who didn't do what I did and didn't get to go to a place like this, or didn't want to come to a place like this. And that's not how I feel. I feel often jealous of the people who have more standard college experiences or post-high school experiences. And I don't know if I'm choosing all my words correctly, but if I'm not, then I suppose it's better to speak it imperfectly than to not speak it at all. To harp on the point, but I am proud of myself for coming to Stanford and doing this. I don't know the other lives that I could have lived. I only know this one, and I know that I've made mistakes, and I became someone who imposter syndrome slowly seeped into me, and I used to not think that that was even possible. I used to believe in myself so hard. I used to think that I was the bee's knees. I used to be worried about my own ego, because in high school I felt like, I was surrounded by people who I didn't respect. I didn't respect my teachers, and they were the ones who were supposed to be guiding me. And I had valid reasons not to respect them and not to respect many of my peers. And looking back, there were also many valid reasons not to respect me, especially for my more progressive friends, who were few and far between, but they did exist, and they did teach me a lot, and a lot of what they taught me did not mentally come to fruition for me until years later, but would have taken longer without their arguing with me and holding me accountable. And I guess all that is to say that I wrote a song that has lyrics that say, "Being loud means you'll be loud and wrong." And that was something that I had to figure out how to deal with. I had to figure out that if I'm gonna have dozens and dozens of close friends, I'm gonna lose more friends than someone who only has a few. If I fall in love dozens of times, then my heart is gonna break more. And if I'm loud, people are gonna know about my being wrong more than someone who is not loud. If I express my thoughts, I open myself to more judgment, and if I do college, I fail more classes than the version of me who didn't do college. And that's just hard and also beautiful. And I am glad to be doing life, even if I'm doing it wrong some of the time. And I want to figure everything out. I've always wanted to figure everything out, and I've always been so anxious about how many books there are and how many of them I'll never get around to reading, and how many things there are to do and how many of them I'm not doing. And I just want to hold more space to be grateful for the things I have done. And sometimes maybe I have chosen things that wouldn't make me as happy as other things that I could have chosen. Obviously, that has happened many times. I've made decisions that have hurt me. I've made decisions that have hurt other people. I've made a lot of decisions. I live my life very loudly and boldly, I think, and it means that there are many people who have known all these iterations of me very deeply, and I sometimes fixate on my flaws that each of these people know about, and I fixate on the people who left for whatever reasons more sometimes than the people who stick around, because I want to perfect myself. I've always wanted to perfect myself. That's why I was someone who was a candidate for a school like this, because I got the best grades you could get, because, I always just thought, if I can do it, then I will do it. If I can get a good grade, then I will. And I guess somewhere along the way, I developed a similar line of thinking about my personality and my flaws and my friendships, in that I thought, if I can be a perfect friend, if I can be a perfect person, then I will. And that led to massive self-destruction, because when I wasn't being a perfect person, when I wasn't being a perfect friend, there was only one person that I could find to blame, and that was myself. And if I could do other things and get a 100, if I could study and figure out how to ace a test, I thought that I could figure out how to be a perfect friend and a perfect person and a perfect daughter, and I couldn't. I thought that I could somehow have a perfect appearance. I thought that I could be what everybody wanted and cater myself to each person I was around. And when I made a mistake, it haunted me for years. I still remember so many of the instances that I knew I had accidentally hurt someone's feelings. All the way back to, elementary school, middle school, high school. Because it hurt me so bad to know that I had made a mistake that in theory was avoidable, and that in the future I must avoid. And eventually, when I realized, or maybe not even realized, but when some part of me had to grapple with the fact that I could not be perfect, I invented a black and white world where the only thing that exists besides perfection is horribleness. And so, upon discovering that I could not be perfect, that some people would always hate me, no matter how much I tried to explain my actions, no matter how much I tried to figure out why I was flawed and how everything in my life had affected me and how I got to that point. And no matter how much of that I did, I was doomed to imperfection. And I still don't know how to live peacefully with the fact that there are people who knew a version of me who knew less than I know now. And who made mistakes that I might not make now. There have always been so many eyes on me ever since I came into myself. I like to tell the story of the 2 years I was in kindergarten. My birthday is in the summer, so my parents wanted me to be one of the older ones in my grade rather than the youngest. And my first year of kindergarten, I was so shy and I hid in the corner, and my dad would make me puppets out of brown paper lunch bags with googly eyes and string hair, and I would sit with my puppets, and I was just terrified. And then my second year of kindergarten, I decided that somebody needed to be in charge at recess if we were gonna effectively and smoothly play games. And so I would take on that burden of leadership. And I got up in front of everyone and I said, okay, here, you and you are gonna be it in our game of tag. And oftentimes, instead of playing with my class, I would just sit and watch them play. And ever since then, I've had this strange multiplicity of personality, this juxtaposition of being anxious and shy, but also having a very strong sense of what I believe to be fair and just, and wanting to have that fairness realized in the world around me. And in order to implement that realization of fairness in my later years in middle and high school, I had to start being loud, because no one else was. I would have classes where my teachers would say things that were unfair or do things that were unfair, and I knew that if I didn't say anything, no one would. And so I would say something, and while I was saying something, I would essentially be having a panic attack. I would be red and hot and sweating and shaking. But I knew that that was less painful than regretting afterward, saying nothing and letting the injustice stand as it was. But being so loud meant that I often was loud and wrong. I'd like to think that I was much more often loud and right, or more right at least, than the people whom I was fighting against. But we do this thing as animals, I suppose, where we hold on to problems and flaws and we fixate on them and we crave their deletion. And I guess I am glad. I've always been glad about my loudness. And lately I've been still very loud about political ideas that I think are important, but I've been less loud about the interpersonal happenings of my own life. And I'm seeing how that feels, and I think I'll figure out a good balance for that. I think that there were a lot of things that I was loud about that I wish I had kept smaller, and I think social media feels so big sometimes, and when you feel like you've been wronged, and especially when you know that the people who wronged you are telling their own story, whether it's to their close friends or to a larger circle. For me at least, I just wanted to set the story straight, you know? I just wanted people to understand what happened and why I was so mad, and I wanted people to know that I wasn't crazy. No matter how loud I was, no matter how bold I was, no matter how much I was willing to exist outside of societal expectations and be artistic and be weird and speak when I'm not supposed to speak or say things that most people don't say, no matter how much of that I did, I wanted people to know that I was doing it knowingly, that I knew exactly which rules I was breaking and why I was breaking them, that I had a manifesto of how to live my life in my head, and that it was all thought out, and that I wasn't unaware, and that I wasn't crazy. And I still struggle with this idea of not wanting to be seen as crazy. And I've had obsessions, and I've had grand unrequited loves that I write about, that I publish. And oftentimes I've used people's real names rather than some kind of disguised name. And I don't know if I always did the right thing when it came to how publicly I've grieved and how publicly I've spoken about the workings of my life. But even if I've made my art imperfectly, I am so grateful that I've made my art. And there is no other way to make art than the imperfect way. And I've learned so much, and some people will only know the me that hasn't learned this much. And I hope that I can learn to be okay with that. I still do this thing where I try to explain to men with whom I go on dates. I try to explain that I sort of like astrology, but I don't really buy into it. And I do tarot cards, but I'm not like super convinced that someone's trying to reach me in the universe. And every time I say it, I want to unsay it, because even if it's the truth, it comes from this not wanting to be judged. It comes from this desire that I've always had as someone who grew up with so many of my friends being men. I just wanted to be taken seriously. And that, relates to the whole not wanting to be seen as crazy. I wanted it to be clear that I was smart and that I knew things and that I was worthy of being listened to. And I learned not to make jokes very often, because sometimes you make a joke that people don't laugh at. And I learned not to answer in Scholars Bowl, because sometimes when I almost answered and then figured out that it would have been wrong, I felt such relief at not having answered and looked stupid. And the relief I felt in those moments felt greater than the reward I felt when I got an answer right. And my face getting red felt like a larger phenomenon than the congratulations that you get when you get the answer. And there's this thing about art where it's just less clear than words, than sentences, than speaking. It's more vague. Sometimes it's more poignant and more succinct, but in terms of opening yourself up to judgment, what you do in your art feels in a way separate from yourself. The person that publishes your art, even if you don't give them some kind of musician name or artist name or pen name, it feels different than just saying your thoughts. But maybe that's because I don't know, maybe there's some deniability, maybe there's some you can write a novel where the people in the novel have variations of thoughts that you've had, and that's totally different from just saying, I've had these thoughts. These are my thoughts. You can write a villain into a movie, into a poem or a song, and the villain is not you. Anyway, I'm gonna decorate this room slightly less, and I am going to, for once, restrain myself from using the super sticky tape that I can never get to peel off the wall without ripping the paint off. But I am going to decorate it because I am living here, and even if I were living here for 1 week, I don't lose anything by putting the effort in to decorate it, even if it's not perfect or it's not the same level of museum quality as my other dorm rooms. Even if I don't get to appreciate it for as long or in the same way. Opening yourself up to judgment is so hard. It is so much easier to keep things in your head, but so much of what inspires me is people sharing their vulnerable thoughts and opinions, and I to do that. So, the last time that I uploaded anything to YouTube, I was in a really bad place in my life. I was having my only psychotic episode of sorts, fueled by whatever the fuck is in Delta 8, some expired Dayquil, and the resurfacing of years of trauma and abuse when I went to go live with my ex-boyfriend. And I have felt a lot of shame about sharing my thoughts and my life at that time. And I would like to carve new space for myself to share things now, even if no one cares except me, and even if I don't even go back and watch it. I think it's nice to see the thoughts that I have had. I love looking back at my art. I try to explain to people that my Instagram is a thing that I am so excited that it has such a breadth of my life, that I do share so much and document so much, and sometimes my documentation comes from a place of fear. I've been describing it recently as a fear of not having a God that I understand or fully believe in. Because if there is nothing with a filing cabinet with my name on it, then I feel I must scurry throughout my life to show people who I am, to show as many people, or to show as deeply as possible who I am, because that's it. Because the people who see me while I'm alive are the only ones seeing me. And if I paint a picture and then rip it up, the picture may as well have never existed. And I think part of that is not valuing myself as a witness, which so many writers have spoken about throughout time. And I know that I am a valid witness. I know that logically. Emotionally, we'll get there. But it is hard. It is, and that is part of why I document things, is that obsessive, if I'm not documenting it, then it's not there anymore, and I lose it. And it's this beautiful thing. I've also been thinking a lot about how, as an artist, your memory becomes such a big and reinforced part of you. So many of the people that I interact with, so many of my friends comment on how I remember so much about them and about my own life. I remember these very specific details, and honestly, I don't think I would, except that I've been writing it all down for so long that it just gets reinforced again and again. This thing that I would have forgotten about, I I read about it happening. I read my old poems from high school and I see these details that otherwise would have been lost. And that is such a cool thing, and it's also such a painful thing to remember so much, because so many things have happened and many of them have been very painful, and I remember a good amount of them. But I do think that some of my thoughts are very powerful and poetic and important to me, and sometimes I speak a thought to a friend and I remiss not, I don't know if I'm using that word right. I've always kind of hated that word. Because people say I would be remiss. And it just sounds like it should be I would be remissed. Like, it just doesn't sound right. But you know, I think one of the big things about me is that I do have a fear of losing things. I have a great and powerful fear of losing things and people and ideas and art and places. What's that poem? The Art of Losing. That's a good one. But you know, I'll have conversations and I'll talk about these big concepts that I'm grappling with, or little concepts, and I think to myself, you know, I wish I had this you know, documented in some way, and so that's what I would like to do more of, maybe. And I don't mind making it public for now, unless it starts to give me stress. I have recently discovered that you don't have to do things that will stress you out. You know, there have been people who have been confrontational to me recently about being pro-Palestine. There have been people who have said things, and I have not replied. And that is very new to me. Just the other day at graduation, someone said something to me about wearing the keffiyeh, and I just didn't say anything back. And so I'm learning to weigh my impact with my own self-care. And you know, I'm a big strategy person, but I think a missing part of that strategy has often been my own preservation. And knowing that I will be able to fight better in the future if I do not wear myself out by partaking in every fight that comes my way, or befriending every person that comes my way, etc., etc. Anyway, I was having a lot of anxiety, and I think I just needed to talk. And I think there is something magic about talking to yourself, which this crazy internet stuff has allowed us to do in a way that makes it feel like we are not just talking to ourselves. I mean, imagine how different I would feel if there were not a camera in front of me right now and I had just been having a conversation with myself for the past 50 minutes. I do think about that a lot. I think about the fact that if you actually are on the phone with someone, you feel comfortable in essentially any scenario talking to yourself in public because you know that you're on the phone. However, if you were just pretending to be on the phone and just talking, I would feel so crazy, even though no one else would know that I wasn't on the phone. And I don't know if there's even a lesson in there or if it's just a comical thought, but yeah, I have been learning also to keep certain things sacred and private when it makes me feel good to do that, and I am doing that. I don't have to share everything. That was something that honestly I first realized like in high school when my phone broke for like a month, and all of a sudden I couldn't tell my group chat about what I was having for dinner, and it felt good to have a thought and then just have it be. And that is good for many thoughts. And some thoughts I want to speak into more of a realized form in the world. Yeah. So, I guess that shall be all for tonight. I feel honestly a lot calmer and I like my blue hair, and I love myself. And talking is just such a thing of its own, it's very different from writing. There's so much, there's cadence and there's tone and there's the fluidity of it, and there's the not being able to cross something out, and there's the stillness, the silent spaces in between thoughts. There's the performance of it. There's just, there's a lot in talking that gets lost in writing, and which is not to say that writing lacks anything. I think what writing loses in relation to talking is regained as something that is then imposed on it in a beautiful way by the reader. The reader decides then the cadence and the tone and the performance. And I think poetry, it kind of tries to mold the two. Poetry says, here are the still spaces. Yeah. So, I guess that'll be all then. And perhaps I will make this a routine. Perhaps this will be a one-time thing. And perhaps I shall be the only person to ever hear these words, but that is still valuable and meaningful, and a thought is never really lost. It will come back to you, even if you don't say it to anyone. Although it might come back easier if you do, and it might transform a little more quickly if you do. So, see you later.